Hi, it's Caroline. I am jumping into this video to let you know that my end of the video recording of the interview did not record. So when you watch the video of my interview with Rachel Druckenmiller, you will not see me on my half of the screen. So this interview is a little different, and I do apologize for just having one side of the screen showing, but I think you're going to enjoy the guest. Now, of course, this podcast focuses on visual artists. And Rachel happens to be a singer, but she is also a motivational speaker who encourages and inspires people with the power of her voice, including in song. I think you'll love her as much as I do. Until next time, go make something. I've long thought that you would be the perfect person to speak to my artist listeners because your whole mission is to encourage people to get out there and unmute themselves and find confidence and clarity in their purpose. So I'd love for you to start us off by telling our listeners about yourself and how you came into your career leading people to be resilient, confident, and unmuted.
So I was like you, right? The product of an entrepreneurial household. And so when you grow up raised by entrepreneurs, you're raised by people that are creative, that are inherently people that push the envelope, that are inherently people that aren't doing the things everybody else is doing. And I feel like artistry is just inherently, that's what that is, when we're willing to express ourselves in some way, when we're willing to put our experience, our soul, our feelings, our energy into the creative expression of a thing. That's a really brave thing to do. And it's something that a lot of people aren't willing to do. And so I think the roots for what I do now were laid from the time I was really little in terms of giving me some of that courage, instilling that in me. But when I was younger, I don't know that I would have considered myself a tremendously creative person. I didn't necessarily see myself as somebody I was confident in certain ways. Like I knew I was a good student. And if everyone else in my class was doing this one behavior and I disagreed with it, I would stand on my own and allow myself to not fit in with the group, allow myself essentially to experience rejection for the sake of upholding whatever I thought was morally correct and principled. So I think as I look back in retrospect, we can see certain things about ourselves when we're younger and be like, that was a brave thing. You maybe didn't think it was brave at the time, but it is brave to stand on your own and to risk rejection from your peers.
Very brave.
And you have to do that also as a creative, right? When you're putting yourself out there, you're risking rejection. Someone's not going to like the way that you did the thing, or someone's going to think it's not good enough, or someone's going to think you could have done this little thing a little differently. And it's like, it's often the people that are critiquing that are not the people that are putting themselves out there, in their own way. So they just get to critique everybody else's stuff. So, I really spent a lot of my life in this space of silencing myself and what I thought and what I felt when I was going through difficult things. I didn't tell people. I was a journaler. The first earliest forms of my creative expression were journaling, writing poems, writing stories, because I felt like, well, I'm not going to be judged here. These pages belong to me and nobody else, and no one else is ever going to see them. And so I can just write and say what I want. And I think a lot of us have had some experience of not being able to express a part of what we think or what we feel or what we want because we're afraid of what someone else is going to think, or we're afraid of rejection, or we're afraid of failure, we're afraid of judgment, we're afraid of disappointing somebody, we're afraid of burdening somebody. And so it's really taken me, almost 40 years to get to the point now where I'm willing to put myself out there the way that I do, to leave a corporate job of 13 years and start a speaking business 7 months before a global pandemic hits. And really draw on that creativity that was instilled in me from a young age to be resourceful. Like creativity is an expression, I think, of resourcefulness too. And that's something that I've been able to draw on. And it's just been this journey, this ongoing journey of expressing myself as an artist in terms of, most recently, publicly, the singing aspect of what I do. So putting myself out there as a singer-songwriter and creating music and drawing on the writings and journalings and musings I had when I was very little. It's like it did start. We can see the ties of where those things started, even if we don't realize it at the time. So, I'm continuing to go on this journey of doing the work, of putting myself out there, of doing some introspection and reflection and talking to friends and journaling and seeing therapists and coaches and doing all the things that we need to do to evolve at a spiritual, emotional, and creative level.
And inspiring people along the way.
Yeah.
And spreading your courage.
That has taken time. I think sometimes there can be an experience that we have that's a catalyst that leads to us being courageous. For me, one of those experiences was when we put ourselves into a new situation, a novel situation that's unfamiliar. I think courage naturally emerges. And for me, the distinct kind of sliding door moment I can think of when that happened for me was when I studied abroad in Spain in college. I took myself out of the environment that I knew, the language that I knew, the people that I knew, and I went and lived in this place where I didn't know anyone, and I had to navigate like everything about that world. And I came back from that, and I was a different person. And that's when I first started, like, let me try this singing thing in front of people and see how that goes. And 20 years later, I finally start writing my own music. So it's been this process of going through these experiences of allowing myself to be challenged, of stepping up when I'm called to do so, or where I see an opportunity and being willing to say, let me give it a try. Even if I mess up, let me give it a try.
What was that moment when you first stepped out there and you sang publicly? Like, what was that first shove? What that looked like?
Well, I mean, I went to a Catholic school from first to 12th grade, and we had choir and stuff. And, they would have people sing at the liturgies in the front of mass. And so I would sing with like a small group of people, but very softly. I mean, there was like 10% of the capacity of my voice is what I would let out in those moments. So I would not say I was singing, I was whatever. And my senior year of high school, I found out that we had private voice instruction at my school. And I thought, well, that is the safest way to do this because it's just in front of one person. So I'm going to take lessons. Tell me how kind of ridiculous this sounds. I'm going to take lessons to improve my technique to get better at a thing I'm never going to do to perform in front of anyone.
Right.
That was actually what I was thinking when I signed up for this. I wasn't like, I want to do theater. No, like, get me off of that stage. No, thank you. No, thank you at all. I wouldn't even join the choir, which had like 100 people in it. I wouldn't even, because you had to audition in front of people. And I was like, too risky. We do that. We cut ourselves off from an opportunity because we already have predetermined the 15 steps down the road that we're going to completely humiliate ourselves. So we don't even attempt it. And so voice lessons for me was a way to ease into it in a way that I felt comfortable with. And then my instructor said, so what song are you going to sing at the year-end recital? And I was like, oh, well, let me tell you how I'm going to be your first student who doesn't do that.
How'd that work out for you?
Well, I sang Angel by Sarah McLachlan.
I love that song.
It's a very emotional. At 17, I didn't know what the song was about. It's a heavy song. It's about her losing a friend to an overdose. And I got up to sing. And at no point in that day did I experience joy. It was like a duty I had to fulfill. I got up, she played the piano, I sang my song. I felt like my mouth was open about 20%. And I sat down. I actually don't even remember it happening. Like, I know that it did, but I think I almost like blocked it out. And I sat down and I was like, I'm done. I don't want to do that again. Thank goodness that's over.
So what changed?
And then a year and a half later, I was in college. A year later, I was in college, and we had this gospel choir at my school they dressed in these golden yellow robes, and the director was this incredibly charismatic, talented, like energetic guy. And he had this contagious way about him. And I remember the school, everyone would pack out the chapel for their concerts, and it was standing room only. And I was in this space. And as somebody who grew up listening to like Desiree and Mariah Carey and Amy Grant, people with gospel roots, right? I was like, I want to do that. I want to do that. And you didn't have to try out. You want to sing, get in. So I got in, and it wasn't until the semester abroad that I came back from that they were doing tryouts for solos for the spring concert that I said, I think I'm at least as good as some of these other people that have gotten solos. And that was the beginning of I was still waited till everyone left and it was just me and the director to try out. But I did, I stepped up to the microphone in front of an empty church and I closed my eyes and I sang. I mean, I can share with you what I did if you want me to.
Yeah, that was my next question was, I know you didn't get your questions ahead of time, but how would you feel about sharing some of that music with us?
Yeah. So the song that I don't even know if this is ultimately the song I ended up singing at the concert. I might have sung a different song, but it's a song I recall trying out with. And it's, the song is When I Rose This Morning. And a group called the Mississippi Mass Choir sings it. So I'll just sing a line from it. And the line has meaning that is not lost on me as I think about what I was doing when I sang it. So here you go. This morning when I rose, yeah, I didn't have no doubt. This morning when I rose, yeah, I didn't have no doubt. This morning when I rose, yeah, I didn't no doubt. This morning when I rose, yeah, I didn't have no doubt.
Every time you sing, it goes right here. I love it. And congratulations on your new single.
Thanks.
Thank you for singing. You inspire me. I joined the church choir as well. I thought a lot of you when I did it because I want to do it for a long time. So I'm looking at that myself, just pursuing it. But I'll probably get the voice coach first, and so I don't have to sing to anybody.
I love it. I'll do it again. I just
baby
hired a voice
steps.
coach 2 years ago for the first time in almost 20 years, and we work together every week.
And I think you hit on something really important. I think that you have to follow the joy.
Yeah.
So looking at where our listeners are coming from as largely visual artists, I do think there's that commonality of having a passion for something that you desperately want to do all the time, like breathing, yet continually holding yourself back for fear of rejection. And I think that many of us as artists of any kind actually move farther than we realize toward that goal. But when we're on the verge of crossing it, we stall or even trip ourselves out of maybe self-protection. Can you speak about ways we can get ourselves to unlock confidence and clarity?
I think part of it when it comes to creative work, I view, there's a book called Big Magic, Elizabeth Gilbert, and there's a line she has in there that I absolutely adore. And I'm like, where's the book? It's on the shelf. Hold on 1/2 second.
Yeah, sure. And I'll be sure to link to it in the show notes.
Okay. I typically bookmark this page. Ha ha ha. I know myself so well. I just, if I could read some of just an excerpt from this book, because it's so.
Go ahead. Absolutely.
Anybody who doubts themselves about this, right? It's, are you considering becoming a creative person? Too late. You already are one. To even call somebody a quote creative person is almost laughably redundant. Creativity is the hallmark of our species. We have the senses for it. We have the curiosity for it. We have the opposable thumbs for it. We have the rhythm for it. We have the language and the excitement and the innate connection to divinity for it. If you are alive, you are a creative person. You and I and everyone you know are descended from tens of thousands of years of makers, decorators, tinkerers, storytellers, dancers, explorers, fiddlers, drummers, builders, growers, problem solvers, and embellishers. These are our common ancestors. We are all the chosen few. We are all makers by design. So I think sometimes what we can do that is helpful is I think sometimes we limit creativity to artistic expression. And we don't recognize that creativity can show up in other ways. So, as a problem solver, as somebody who can take a skill that you have and apply it to something that you can get paid to do while you're figuring out how to get paid to do the thing that you really want to do all the time. I mean, I wanted to leave my corporate job 7 years before I did. 7 years before I did. And the thing that I had started to do is I just started to notice where I was getting asked to do things. And I started to notice where people were, things people were appreciating me for, or things that they were thanking me for, or things that I would repeatedly get emails about or comments about that I did well. And I would document that. A lot of us, somebody gives us praise and we feel so uncomfortable hearing it that we don't even let it sink in because we dismiss it or we diminish it or we deflect it or we do something because it's uncomfortable for so many people to allow praise to sink in because we're told that if you do that, you're an egomaniac or you're going to be too big for your britches or who do you think you are? All this nonsense that I think we need to stop listening to. And if we start to notice what are people appreciating you for, there could be something else that, if you're trying to make a living doing what you're doing, for instance, right? And you're like, I just don't know if I can cut it. To get creative and like, what are other ways for you to use the skills and talents that you use to create your art? Are there other ways to use it? So for me, I didn't know that I wanted to be a speaker and I get to basically tell stories and design experiences for people for a living, which feels like very creative work. And, I wasn't at a spot where I felt comfortable doing that on my own for quite a while. And so I just looked at what I was doing in my current job and thought, well, how can I integrate these things that I want to do into my work in a way that is enjoyable for me, in a way that brings value to my employer? I think that's a question a lot of people don't ask themselves. And it might mean coming up with a creative solution. It often requires working for an employer that is open, and isn't just like, here's the box you're in, stay there. I happened to work for somebody that was open to the different things I wanted to do. So I think that's part of it. Not being in this spot where you need to, like for me, my music now is just, I don't care if I make a dime off of any music I create. Or recording, that being said, who knows how I feel about that 5 years from now, but I'm not doing it for that reason. I'm doing it because it's in my heart to share these messages with people. And it's been a source of joy and aliveness for me my whole life. And I know that I'm called to do it, but I think the difference is that I'm not having to do that for money. You know what I mean? Like I purely get to do that for the creative pursuit of it and for the experience of gift giving. So I think a way that someone could connect to a sense of, if someone's thinking, well, how do I know which of the skills that I'm applying to my art could be used at work? I'm a big advocate of certain assessments like Clifton Strengths, Values in Action, the VIA Institute on Character. And so those are two assessments I really love because one looks at your character strengths and the other looks at a different set of strengths. And I like to look at the language that's used across both of those types of assessments, or even something like, some people are fans of the Enneagram, people are fans of DISC. There's so many different things out there. But something that I found to be really helpful, that was a fun creative process, is to take a bunch of these different assessments and to notice what were the common threads and themes that crossed over in all of them. And how could I take the language that these assessment tools were giving me and use that language to communicate to somebody else what it is that I did well, what it is that was a differentiator, what it is that I brought to the table. And that would be something anyone listening could do.
It's helpful. I took one of those assessments through your website.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, right?
Yeah. And it opened my eyes in a lot of ways. It gave me insight into areas where I excel or I struggle in the day work. I do design during the day. And when I have friction or it doesn't feel like it's flowing, that I could see alignments with where my personality strengths were.
Mhm.
And when I was out of sync, things just weren't flowing with the creativity the way that they could be. And when they were flowing, it really was in line with those strengths,
Mm.
personality wise, in addition to skills wise.
Yeah.
And that's worth honoring. You know, there are days where I thought, well, you mentioned a box, I have to fit into this box, or this design is a corporate assignment, so I have to take it on in a certain way or communicate in a certain way at work.
Mhm.
And some of those ways that I perceived in colleagues who didn't have the same personality strengths I do,
Mm.
they have different strengths.
Mhm.
If I tried to mirror them and it wasn't me, then I was struggling and I was thinking that there was something wrong with me because maybe, I wasn't fitting in with the same personalities. But I don't think the goal is to meet everyone on their terms and mirror everybody around you. I think it's to find where you excel, and it's probably going to be in areas that you're already naturally strong,
Yeah.
and reinforce that and honor that.
Mhm. Yeah. And ask yourself, what's a way? So, one of the ways people feel fulfilled at work and what they're doing is asking yourself, what's a way that I could express this particular strength this week? So, like spirituality, creativity, and curiosity are three of my top five character strengths. And spirituality is really from their definition of, connecting to a sense of sort of transcendent meaning and purpose. And I'm inherently a meaning maker. Like everything that happens, I look around, I'm like, what's the meaning? Sometimes I spiritually bypass. I sometimes get to the meaning before I've actually dealt with and integrated whatever the thing is that happened. And that's something I have to catch myself in sometimes. But knowing this about yourself is so helpful because then you can convey to someone, I could say, hey, as somebody who's inherently really curious and somebody who's creative and resourceful, if you're looking for someone to deliver a different type of experience, as a speaker, and as someone who's deeply connected to wanting to make an impact that's meaningful to an audience, these are some things I can do that are going to help to differentiate me to bring value to your event, right? So if I can specifically say those things, like I'll ask questions that catalyze insight, that unleash possibility and curiosity, like people oh, we want that, And so it's taken a lot of time to get to the point where I can whittle that down, or say from StrengthsFinder, their language, say I'm a strategic achiever who is futuristic. And so I'm someone who can kind of see uh, I can see the big picture vision, but I can also map out paths for how to get there in a way that might be uncommon. And as a result of that, I'm really good at helping people to, get motivated and to get unstuck and, to arrive at a new solution and something that elevates a sense of possibility in them so that they feel more hopeful. So when we have this language, when we've actually mined ourselves, like when we study ourselves, and we combine those types of assessments with questions we can ask other people, like, hey, what shows up when I do? What qualities do I bring into a room? Or, hey, when you've seen me at my best, can you tell me about a time when you've seen me at my best? What showed up? What showed up in me? What did you see in me in that moment? So you allow the combination of the self-reflection, of doing your own work, of just noticing, what do people thank me for? What do I feel most alive when I'm doing it? With these vetted assessments, with allowing other people to be a mirror, people that know us, allow them to reflect back. The combination of all those things give us a lot of clarity about who we are and what we do well. And then once we have more clarity to communicate what it is we do well, that gives us greater confidence to be able to communicate it and advocate for ourselves and ask for what we want and need and put ourselves out there because we're firm in who we are. And there's a confidence that comes with that.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And I think that as artists, we're always told, and I think put pressure on ourselves, find my voice, find my voice. What's my message? What's my artist statement? What am I about? And you're supposed to have this all figured out. And I think it starts with doing the work yourself on yourself, as you said, which I think involves allowing space for quiet time, which I think is largely missing for people these days with all of the constant barrage of input. And my listeners will tell you that I nag them about meditating, because training yourself to relax, which is great for reducing stress, but to actually stop and train yourself to listen not only to others and what they're telling you about what they see in you, but to hear your own wisdom inside of your own self, but also to look for those personality aspects and those strengths. And when you do that work that you're talking about, that right there is bringing a lot of that information to you if you start to focus on it and be able to pay attention to what information is readily available if you know where to look.
Yeah, and then you don't feel like you also, it sort of is, it can be a form of validation.
Yeah.
I think when we hear the same thing over and over again, it's like, maybe all these things aren't lying to me. Maybe there's some truth into what I'm reading or what I'm realizing or what other people are telling me. Maybe and that's part of the journey, is being able to learn to accept and receive that, as opposed to push it away.
That's really good that you've pointed that out, particularly because part of having confidence and realizing success as an artist involves getting comfortable with accepting praise and self-promotion. So what advice do you have for creatives to advance their careers without feeling like they're being obnoxious? Artists will often shut themselves down when it comes time to speak up for their own achievements.
I mean, so there's a group called Catalyst that does a lot of research around leadership. And there was a study that they did, this was like early 2010s. And they found that, specifically related to women, that one of the best ways for women to advance their careers, to increase their salary growth, and to accelerate in their careers is to make their achievements known. Which is one of the things that most of us are told from the time we're itty bitty. Do not do that. Do not toot your own horn. You need to let your work speak for itself. Well, guess what? Sometimes the work doesn't speak for itself. And here's the frame I always like to invite people to think about when you're thinking about self-promotion. Because inherently, if you're a creative or you're an entrepreneur, you work for yourself, like, you just have to be okay with promoting yourself. It's the way that it's done that matters. And there's some nuances to that. And one is asking yourself, if you're sharing something, asking, am I in service to the audience or am I in service to my ego? So am I doing this? Is me sharing this just here to puff myself up? Or is there something here that the audience could, or the audience or my, group that I want to reach, that they could somehow benefit from, or see themselves in, or see a version of their story in, that reading this or seeing this thing or listening to this thing could somehow help them in some way? I mean, when I first put my song out there, I was initially like, are people going to get tired of me talking about the song all the time? Like, are people going to be over it? Then the stories I would hear from people would send me messages and, say, I played this song. This song has become my 11-year-old daughter's anthem. Or I played the song for my executive coaching clients who were going through a really difficult time and they were in tears, and played this for my husband who's dealing with PTSD and it brought him to tears. I'm just like, oh my gosh, I'm doing a disservice if I'm not sharing this expression. Because like the intent, putting it out there in the first place was I did it. So the song's called Somebody. I wrote it because, I felt like for most of my life that I had to, and I still get caught up in this, I have to prove that I'm somebody. I have to be impressive enough for someone to see me as somebody who matters. I cannot just be who I am. If I am being myself and I am not going above and beyond, then, what's the point? That was how I felt for a lot of my life. And, the song for me was an anthem and a declaration to say, what if you believed you are somebody already? Regardless of how many people purchase your art, regardless of how many people listen to your podcast, regardless of how many people buy your song. People ask me, oh, has it been successful? And I was like, on what terms? Like, has the song been successful? I offered a part of myself to the world in a way that has always been a source of joy for me. And I didn't even know that I could do it. And I did it. Whatever follows is icing on the cake. But that was the point. The point was because I had something to say that only I could say in the way that I said it, that only I could sing in the way that I sang it at the time that I did it. And so when you think about your art, I mean, there's a book called The War of Art, Stephen Pressfield. And one of the things he writes about is this resistance that we experience as creatives, you know, this capital R resistance that gets in the way and tells us that, you know, I'm not sure if you have what it takes. I'm not sure if this is good enough. But the reality is you are the only person with your unique set of skills, abilities, experiences, talents, insights, perspectives, giftings, nuances, idiosyncrasies. You are the only person who will ever exist on the planet ever that has the exact combination of all of that stuff that you do. The only person. And so for us to think that we somehow like don't matter. I mean, if you just think for a second, the number of things that had to go the way that they did for any of us to even exist. Your great-great-great-grandparents and who they had to meet and who they had to connect to when they did and how they had to conceive their children when they did, where they did, and how the number of things that have to go right for any of us to even make it this far is so mind-bogglingly unfathomable that for us to for 1 second doubt that we don't have something unique and special to say is a disservice to humanity.
I don't even know how to follow that up. Thank you for my teaser. There are about 11 of them. I love you so much. So this song, Somebody, we're going to link to if it's all right, we're going to link to the iframe so that people can watch it in the show notes, because I mean, it just wrecked me. I love this song so much. It is an anthem. It is an anthem for every human, let alone every artist. But I mean, as an artist, it was like, so thanks for that. And you touched on so many things, but especially as an artist, I think Brene Brown, hustling for your worthiness. Mm-hmm. And we do that over and over, so many of us. And we do that just skipping like 7 steps of realizing that we're already enough, and just getting into that old tape of hustling and trying to do enough to prove that we're enough over and over again before we even catch it. And I think that there's so much to what you're saying about finding those ways to remind yourself, whoa, back up 500 feet. I think that ties in with asking others, what do you see in me when I show up? What do you see? It's not to close your eyes and hope they don't say something negative and, oh, they're going to tell me something to fix. It's to see the beauty in you that they see, that's already there.
Yes.
It's already there.
We're blind to our own brilliance oftentimes. We
are. And it ties into with you're talking about making your music first and foremost because you had it in you to say and to share. And that is something that I like to tell my listeners: to reach a really high level of success as an artist, be able to get the feedback and process it and accept that there is feedback to hear. Mm-hmm. What you accept of that and what you decide, no, this part over here I did because I wanted to intentionally. It doesn't mean you have to accept all of the feedback you get as legitimate. Other people's points of view, of course, are legitimate for them. Mm-hmm. But, you know, if you integrated everything somebody said and everybody that you asked about a piece of art, you'd be all over the place. You wouldn't have your own opinion. And you'd be going back and forth. They say, put this in, take this out. You wouldn't have any opinion or any place to stand. So I think that it's good to be able to get that feedback, especially if you're learning your skills. But it's also important to know those lines when you can delineate, no, I said what I needed to say. And that has a lot as well to do with finding your voice and knowing when your art is done. Because in my mind, if I've corrected the objective things that I think design-wise, composition, perspective-wise are inaccurate with my art, and I've said what I needed to say, then I've left it all out on the field. I'm done. The painting is done. You could pick at your paintings forever and they'll be terribly overworked if you're trying to reach perfection.
Same with music. I mean, I could sit there and be like, well, I mean, I'm working on 2 more songs right now, and I'm like, you know, there's a point at which like there's the difference between excellence and perfectionism. I mean, it's a fine line. Excellence is like, I have this certain standard. There might be little things, like even in the track Somebody, it's not someone we're listening to it with a really trained ear. There's parts that are a little bit gritty, you know, that may not be something that you'd hear a machine produce, but a machine wasn't producing it, a human was, you know? So there's going to be a nuance of a thing that maybe comes through that isn't perfect. But that's not the point. You know, the point isn't to make it perfect. I had a voice coach that I met through a speaker training I went through 5 years ago, and I was working on telling the story about the gospel choir thing and singing this morning when I rose line, and we were going to her for feedback, and we were practicing bits of our things, and we were doing it so we could get specific feedback. And I finished doing about a 5-minute bit and singing the thing, and she asked me, because I said I want to work on the singing part of this. That's what I want your feedback on. And she said, so what's the problem with the singing thing? And I said, oh, you know, I'm holding myself back. She said, yeah, you are. And she said, you know, my voice teacher, she asked me, she said, what's the lyric again? What does that phrase mean to you? And I said, this morning when I rose, I didn't have no doubt. People have asked me, they're like, is that really the lyric? And I'm like, yes, it's really the lyric. I did not use that for like a stylistic impact. That's actually the words of the song. And I got emotional when I said it, you know, and she reminded me, she said that her voice teacher always said to her to forget the notes and sing the intention. And so when I think about what I'm doing as an artist or as a speaker or as a singer, there are people that can do something technically with technical perfection and with no soul. And I don't want to be that kind of artist.
Neither do I. And I think that it ties right back into what we were saying with knowing whether you have said what you had to say inside, as opposed to holding back to hear and crowdsource everybody else's opinion. Yes, I like to say you've got to learn the rules before you break them, whatever your art is, whether it's singing or sculpture or painting or drawing or printmaking. But once you know and you have those skills, then you've got to go for that feel and the soul of what you're trying to say. And I think that's what you're saying. And I saw that video, actually. You did some singing, and the difference between the before, which was great, but the after, when she said, don't worry about the notes, you still hit them, only you actually hit them even better because there was more, you were still hitting the notes, but the power in your voice when you let loose was like,
yeah.
And that all came from like way down inside. Like, wow.
Yeah.
Not mechanically, but like your soul just went like, wow.
Hello, I arrived.
And I'm watching it. I'm like, wow. It was a beautiful thing to behold that.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for doing that, for that courage. I mean, I could see what it took out of you. You were like wrecked, but you did it and you let it out. You stepped up. You didn't go, oh, I can't, I'm going to run away now. You were like, all right, you were like, I think scared of stepping over that line.
Yeah.
And then you did it.
Yeah.
And to watch that happen, I should probably link to that video too. I mean, wow.
Thanks. Well, secret spoiler alert, some things are coming in a TEDx talk that I'm doing in July. So
Congratulations.
sure. Thanks.
And feel free to send any links after this talk, because
Sure.
I'll backlink them on my site.
Right.
So I know you journal. Are you
Mhm.
still journaling? And if so, can you tell me how it can help artists, and if that should be separate from, say, the process of keeping a sketchbook, if they can be one and the same, pictorially journaling or combining words with images? Do you have a recommendation?
I mean, I think whatever the thing is that makes it easiest for you to do the thing is the thing you should do. Like, don't overcomplicate it. I mean, I happen to journal. I'm not much of a drawer. And I don't even have like a specific schedule. I know there's books, like a book I need to read, The Artist's Way, right? Julia Cameron, that I'm like, I know I should do that and do morning pages and whatever, but just haven't, and that's okay. I think the greatest gift we can give ourselves is to not judge ourselves for whatever our pattern or rhythm is, but I have it right next to my bed is where my journal typically is. So, often before I go to bed or when I get up in the morning, or I'm going through a book right now, Self-Compassion by Kristen Neff. And there's like exercises in the book that, self-compassion is a really hard thing for me. I am very hard on myself, and I can beat myself up when I make mistakes and get critiques or criticisms. Like if someone's leaves on an evaluation, it was weird that she sang in the presentation. Okay. Like the first time I read that, I was like devastated. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. Like I took their critique as like the gospel truth. If someone was really in a space of being open and receptive to take in and experience, no, they wouldn't have written that. Something about that's not necessarily about me and a reflection that I shouldn't do it. It's something in them that they're not comfortable with that I activated. Okay.
That's right, because you crossed a line and they were trying to stay in here.
Yeah.
And you reached out, and that broadcasts across emotional space, psychological space. I mean, when you sing, it's emotional.
Yeah.
And I think you hit a nerve because it was an effective song, and you really hit that emotion. And the fact that you made them uncomfortable really speaks to the power, I think, of what you did.
Oh, thanks. It was hard to, still, or someone will say, playing, even if I just play the song and tee it up or whatever, it's like, oh, self-serving. We talked about self-promotion. Thought it was self-serving of her to play her song. She played a different song. And I'm like, I'm on the stage. I do what I want. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes you just got to get to a spot and be like, opinion duly noted and rejected. Like, you just have to decide. And it is so hard. I'm really sensitive to critique. I want everyone to like me. I do. I'm not generally an extremist in really any areas of my life that I can think of. I try to like kind of walk the middle line so that I can reach as many people as possible. But inevitably, it's like still. And so as I'm starting to come out in a different way with like integrating my own music into the work that I'm doing, I'm still navigating the best ways to do that. But some people are like not about it. And that's a new thing I'm having to learn how to navigate. So I do try to say, what is the truth in this feedback that I could receive, that maybe they didn't communicate it in the most effective way, but is there any morsel of truth in here that could be useful to me? And if not, someone's just having a bad day and they just needed something to complain about, I can decide that is not me. I can separate it. It's hard when you're creating your art. It's an extension of your soul. It's hard not to be affected when someone critiques what is an extension of your soul. People say it's just business, it's not personal. It's like, well, when it's your art, it feels deeply personal.
It absolutely does. And I think that what you said about being able to stop and say, draw those lines of having an opinion in order to be creative and to express yourself as artists, any kind of artist. That's the scary part, is when the artists are afraid of rejection. They are afraid to take a stand and to say, this is my line. This is what I'm about. And I think sometimes artists block themselves from finding their voice. I think they have it in there because they're afraid that once they actually take an actual position, now they're a target. Now they've got something that can be rejected.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
easier to stay vague.
It is easier to stay vague. I'm like, I don't know who could be offended by a message of you are somebody, but maybe somebody is. So
Yeah, good point.
okay, like not my audience. But I've heard someone once say that if you're trying to be so quiet and careful so that you appease everyone, you won't be loud enough to reach the people that you're really meant to reach.
And to be somebody, you have to actually show up. So if you're trying to be diluted, as you're saying, you're really trying to be nobody. You're trying to blend in and just evaporate away and be invisible. And I think a lot of us, especially if you've had a tough childhood, here I go, all Freudian, but I think some of us, myself included, have to fight against that urge to disappear, to try and make nice, be liked, or completely stay off the radar and become invisible. For instance, in times of childhood stress and violence or trauma, we have to learn to show up and stop disappearing.
Yes. And to be seen. I mean, that's what this song ultimately was initially written to my 9 and 16 and 25-year-old self and my burned out 32-year-old self who needed to be constantly reminded over and over again that, you are somebody, you matter, you are enough. And, it's not because you didn't make any mistakes, and it's not because you followed all the rules, and it's not because you covered up what you really felt. It's because you're acknowledging this just innate aspect of who you are as a human. That's true of everyone. Everyone is already somebody. So if you start from that posture, to even put yourself out there, to put your art out there, to put your expression out there, you have to believe that you fundamentally matter. If you don't believe that you matter, then why bother putting anything out there? Because you don't matter. So then what you create doesn't matter. What you create is an extension of who you are. So if you decide, I don't matter, I'm not going to create anything. I'm not going to put myself out there. I'm not going to let myself be seen. I don't matter. But if you dare to decide, I do matter, I am somebody, then that allows you to show up with greater courage. Because you're like, no matter what anyone says, I still am somebody. If everyone rejects this, I still am somebody. If people think this sucks, I still matter. And that is I'm still I'm working on that still. You know what I mean? But it's the truth. It's the truth.
And it's what people need to hear.
Yeah.
Now, because so many artists are still working the day job on some level, maybe they're working part-time or, they're not there yet, or they think maybe it only counts when they're only working for themselves, they're working full-time. I love that you advocate for progress over perfection. And I think that despite best intentions for many artists who have to do that day job, of course, creating every day, it's not realistic in the sense that, depending on the season of their life, they would just burn out. It's not doable. So can you provide some wisdom for creatives who, if they're not creating every day, but they are working towards their dream, they have a dream and they're doing what they can when they can, to know that it counts, instead of shooting themselves down and telling themselves, well, I'm never going to reach my goal, I'm not an artist because I'm not doing this every day, like it's some kind of failing.
Well, funny thing is, I wouldn't. So on LinkedIn, there's a headline you can use to tell people what you do. So for the past couple of years, I had on there keynote speaker who sings. Who sings? There is very intentional wording there.
I noticed that.
Not singer, keynote speaker who sings. Because I'm like, I am not a singer. A singer is somebody who records and creates music. I am not a singer. So finally, when I decide And by the way, I don't read music or play any instruments. So joke's on me that I could even create a song. But that's the power of collaboration because I work with somebody who knows how to do what I don't. He's a composer, he's a musician, he plays like 5 different instruments, and he's also a singer. And so I could take my skill and talent of the written part, and being a storyteller and doing poetry when I was growing up. And that's basically what a song is, right? You just put music to poetry and create this thing. And so it wasn't until I put my first song out there that I decided to say, even on LinkedIn, I'm a keynote speaker and a singer. So I put this pressure on myself that I had to hit this certain thing before I decided that I was that. I was putting covers out there of things prior to that happening. I was singing in other ways that other people would have probably said, you're a singer. Yeah, of course you're a singer. Like, what do you mean? You sing, you're a singer. They're the same thing. But I had this qualifier. And now, even as I'm doing my TEDx, they ask you to share like what it is that you do and what's your title. And I gave them like speaker, but they're sensitive, I think, to promoting someone as a speaker in TEDx or for whatever reason. And so what they have as my title is singer, songwriter, and entrepreneur. And I'm like, okay. Like I'm still working on accepting that identity shift. But the reality is like, there is no rule book or definition or handbook or playbook that gets to tell you whether or not you are the thing that you are. Like other people don't get to define that for you. Big magic. You are a creative person. You are innately a creative person. So let's get that. We don't even need to say that. That's like a redundancy to say you're a creative person. So, I think for us to just recognize that and recognize that a title doesn't determine what we're able to create either. Like you don't need a certain label or a certain title to create what it is you feel called to create. Like that's just noise. That's just noise. And I think when it comes to creating consistently, ideally, our creative expression is something that makes us feel alive. And so thinking through what are the experiences that you can create for yourself that allow you to go to that place. So for me, I have scheduled voice lessons at 3:00 every Monday. I know at a bare minimum, once a week, I'm going to have an hour to work on warming up my voice and working on nuances of things and running through songs. I have a songwriting session with the singer-songwriter, the producer that I work with every other week for 2 hours, and we write music. And I found myself, I would leave those sessions and I'd spend like 2 hours working on the song. Like I couldn't get it out of my head. And so part of it is putting ourselves in the right circumstances in either a certain place or with a certain person that naturally brings that creative expression out of us. And those are the two places that I find it most. Is when I'm in a voice lesson, when I'm in a songwriting session, or even when I come out of therapy. Like a lot of insight, I've gotten song lyrics from conversations I've had with my therapist. And I just have my journal there with me. So it's like almost like always being ready, like always bringing that little moleskin or whatever the heck it is that you have with you. So when you're in that moment, you can capture the inspiration, Or I do a lot of voice notes as a singer. You capture lyrics and stuff in voice notes. I don't put this pressure on the art to be like, you need to have a 12-song album out by the end of the year. I'm like, I'm going to challenge myself. I'm going to see if I can get a 6-song EP done by the end of the year. I'm just going to see if I can do it. And the challenge is like to try to do it. Just attempting it is something that like, can that be a success? Can that be a success? I mean, I'll have 3 songs by the end of the summer for sure. We'll see, we'll see what happens. But I think reminding ourselves of why we're doing it in the first place. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing whatever it is your form of art is? And writing that down and recording it and playing it back to yourself or putting it on a note in your mirror or texting it to a friend and say, when I feel like I'm down in the dumps, send me this screenshot back to remind me of why I do this. look at your favorite art. You know what I mean? Like have a collection of all the things that you're proudest of and like look back on that as a reminder. Get out in nature. Nature is inherently for any form of creative expression an activator. Um, Solitude, going to a new place, having a novel experience, doing something you've never done, going to take a dance class if you're a painter, going to take a painting class if you're a dancer, going and doing improv, like signing up for an improv class. Whenever you do something that challenges yourself in some way, you're like stirring something up that can be used. And when you're in a low point, ask yourself how you can mine it because there's so much gold in our lowest moments. Song lyrics for my next song happened 2 weeks after I was in a bad car accident a couple years ago, fractured my back, was hit while running. And the settlement happened. And I was in this really difficult period of grief for about 3 months after that happened, just trying to process what that all meant for me. And these lyrics came out for another song of, you know, what's gonna be, I didn't see it coming until it knocked me down. It happened in a moment, the way I hit the ground. I didn't know what happened, and it was hard to breathe. Now I need the wind that was knocked out of me. Like, I was cleaning my house, and I just started getting 2 weeks after the settlement snippets of this song, and I'm like, voice record, write it down, right? It's like this little flitting thing that it's available to us. Sometimes when we're cleaning our house, sometimes when we're not expecting it and it emerges, and to be grateful, to be so grateful in those moments when it comes up, instead of beating yourself up for all the times it's not showing up. When you have those golden moments, when you create something that you're like, wow, this isn't even like, feel like it was me, to really let that sink in and really relish that. Like, what a gift, you know? So soak in when you have those good moments and use that as motivation to keep going on the days where you're struggling.
Wow. I'm like writing, you see me looking down, I'm writing sticky notes, like they're all over my desk. So just one of the things that you said, I love when you're talking about using those moments that are not so pretty. They're not so happy and fluffy. And somebody once said to me, oh, paint pretty things. Don't sit with the negativity. Don't paint the negative stuff. Don't paint so dark. Some of my work it's gritty and it comes from my soul, but it really gave me a voice in those times, and it's powerful. And I wondered about that now that things are starting to get level for me and I'm starting to have the time to paint. And not everybody's a painter. I mean, whatever your art is, it sounds like you also agree that it's okay not to just paint pretty things.
No, I'm like, I should probably do like a song that's just like an uplifting song solely at some point. But the nature, it's like I sing how I speak. You know, there's a message driven thing to it. It's the song probably was catalyzed by some source of insight or pain or triumph over pain. And that's what I would speak about. That's what I want to sing about, you know? And so I'm not trying to like get the next bop that's going to blow up on TikTok or whatever. Like, I'm just want to create honest music that is from my heart, that I feel called to share in the way I feel called to share it, you know? And that, I think if we can ground ourselves in whatever that version of, you know, what our art is in that regard, I think we can help ourselves to create with less judgment.
I think that's excellent advice. And learning to hear, learning to listen to those moments of inspiration that are going to come out of struggle or anything that really taps your soul and goes, hey, you know, this is something you can take and create from. I think it's very important to learn to hear those moments of that soft whisper of creativity when you're cleaning the house or you're driving somewhere. And every time I tell myself, oh, this is such an obvious idea, I'm going to remember this. I can tell you not to make that assumption because life will get in your way, and 10 minutes later could be. But suddenly you're going, oh, what was that great idea? And it's like, it's gone. So please, listeners, never assume you're going to remember a great idea. Use the voice memo.
Mhm.
Jot yourself a note on the back of a receipt on your car seat next to you, right on the back of that grocery bag, whatever. Always have a paper and pen.
Yeah.
Because those ideas, once you start practicing listening to them, they're going to come.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be ready to tap into those so that you have that reservoir for creativity.
Agreed. Well said.
So, Rachel, thank you so much for reuniting with me and getting back on the show. For my listeners, I first met Rachel when I interviewed her with the National Wellness Institute years and years ago, when she was inspiring people to come out of their shells and really stand up and use their creative voice, their soul, their emotional voice, everything that's within them. And you are a gift in every possible way. Your light is so bright. I would love for you to wrap us up with your best advice for the people listening to us right now that want to get out there and unmute themselves.
All right. Can I sing it out?
Yes, I would love that.
All right. This is a song everybody knows, but it's a reminder. So what doubt does is doubt dims us. It diminishes us. We hold ourselves back more than anybody else holds us back. I can say that with 99% certainty. And so this song, I was with a community sometime in 2020, 2021, and there was a new woman who had joined the community, and I missed the first few minutes of the session, and she was sharing a story about how she was told at work to dim her light. I did not know this. I came into the session, and my friend Kevin, who was on the call, said, oh, Rachel just joined us. Rachel loves to sing. You want to sing us a song? I did not know this new person was in the room. And I said, sure. And so what I sang was this, and it's a reminder for everyone to really internalize it, like shoulders back, like Care Bear stare, they put their chest out and they let that beam of light kind of come out. So here's this reminder for everybody that I want you to internalize and really feel it and really hear it. So here we go. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine,